They said Vincent Moretti was cursed. 27 nurses had walked through his door, and 27 had fled before sunset. Some left crying. Others left silent, eyes hollow like they had seen something that broke them. One man, a veteran who had survived 2 wars, ran from that house and never stopped running. I watched them all from my small apartment window across the street, wondering what kind of monster lived behind those black iron gates. My name is Clara Hayes. I was nobody special. Just a nurse with holes in her shoes and debts so heavy I could barely breathe. When the agency called with an offer, I knew it was him. They offered 5 times my usual pay. I should have been afraid, but fear is a luxury for people who still have something to lose. I had nothing. The mansion rose like a shadow against the gray sky. Guards with dead eyes watched me approach. Inside, the housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, looked at me with something like pity. She asked if I had read the contract. I said yes. She asked if I understood what happened to the others. I told her I understood perfectly. Then she led me upstairs to meet the devil himself. Vincent Moretti sat in darkness so thick I could barely see him. Heavy curtains blocked every window. The only light came from a dying fire in the corner. He did not move when I entered, did not speak. Just watched me with eyes black as coal, cold as winter. Mrs. Chen whispered the rules. No lights. No speaking unless spoken to. No touching without permission. 37 rules total. I listened to every one, then asked where I could find a measuring tape. Mrs. Chen blinked, confused. I explained that Rule 15 required medication placed exactly 90 centimeters from his bed, and I wanted to be precise. Vincent's head turned slightly. I could not see his expression, but I felt his attention shift. I continued. Rule 23 said water must be 18 degrees Celsius. I had brought a thermometer. Rule 8 forbade red clothing. I was wearing gray. I had memorized every impossible demand he had made. Then I stepped forward and said I was ready to begin. He could try to break me if he wished. He could throw things, yell, make my life miserable. But I would not run. I had survived worse than a man hiding in the dark. For the first time in months, Vincent Moretti spoke. He told me to get out. I did not move. I stood there in the darkness and told him no. He could fire me if he wanted. But while I was here, I would do my job. His wound was infected. I could smell it from across the room. Without treatment, he would be dead in weeks. So he could spend his energy fighting me, or he could let me change those bandages. Silence stretched between us like a wire pulled tight. Then he stood. He was taller than I expected, and even sick, he moved like something dangerous. He walked toward me until I had to tilt my head back to meet his eyes. He said people had died for less disrespect than I was showing him. I told him I believed it. Then I told him about my father, who beat me for 8 years. About the orphanage where older kids burned my belongings for fun. About my husband James, who died in my arms 1 year ago while I begged God for a miracle that never came. I told him he could kill me if he wanted. But he could not scare me. I had been afraid my whole life. I had nothing left to fear. Something changed in his face. Not softness, but recognition. Like seeing his own reflection in a broken mirror. He let me change the bandages that night. His shoulder was worse than I thought. The wound was hot, swollen, leaking fluid that smelled of death. He did not flinch when I cleaned it, did not make a sound, even though I knew it hurt. When I finished, he told me I had 1 week. If I annoyed him, pitied him, or tried to save him, I would be gone. I asked what would happen if I made it through the week. He said no one ever had, so he had not thought about it. I held out my hand. He stared at it like I was offering him poison. But finally, he shook it. His hand was burning with fever and trembling in a way he tried to hide. That night, he called me at 2 in the morning. Then 3. Then 4. Testing me. Seeing when I would break. Each time, I came to his room within 5 minutes. Each time, I did exactly what he asked. And on the 3rd night, when I brought his medication, he swept the tray off the table. Pills scattered across the floor. Water spilled everywhere. I knelt down and picked up every single pill. Wiped the floor clean. Got a new tray. He knocked it down again. I picked it up again. 4 times he did this. 4 times I cleaned it up without a word. On the 5th time, I told him my father used to throw dinner plates at the wall every night. I had picked up broken glass for 8 years until my hands were scarred and my heart was hard. I told Vincent he could knock down 100 trays, and I would pick them up 100 times. Because this was my job. And I had survived far worse than picking up pills at 4 in the morning. I asked him if he really wanted me gone, or if he was testing whether anyone in the world was patient enough to stay. He said nothing. I turned to get another tray. But then I heard him move. When I looked back, he was bending down, picking up the tray himself. He placed it back on the table without looking at me. It was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get from Vincent Moretti. That night, something shifted between us. Not trust. Not yet. But a crack in the wall. A sliver of light breaking through. The next morning, Mrs. Chen told me Vincent's younger brother had died 3 years ago. That Vincent blamed himself. That he had been dying slowly ever since, punishing himself for a sin I did not yet understand. I asked how the brother died. Mrs. Chen said it was not her story to tell. Everything changed on the 8th night. I woke to sounds of breaking glass and a voice calling out a name I did not recognize. I ran to Vincent's room and found him on the floor, tangled in blankets, burning with fever. His eyes were open but seeing nothing. He kept calling for someone named Michael, begging him not to go, saying he was sorry, over and over. Sorry, sorry, sorry. I pressed my hand to his forehead. He was on fire. I got cold towels, called the doctor, stayed beside him all night while he called for his dead brother. And slowly I understood. Michael had been kidnapped. Vincent had refused to pay the ransom because paying would make the family look weak. He thought he could save his brother another way. He was wrong. They had sent Michael back 3 days later in a wooden box. Tortured. Broken. Dead. Vincent had chosen pride over his brother's life. And he had been killing himself ever since, one slow day at a time. When dawn came, Vincent's fever finally broke. He opened his eyes and saw me sitting beside his bed, my hand still holding his. He stared at me for a long moment. Then, instead of pulling away, he let me keep holding on. Vincent recovered slowly after that night. His body healed, but I could see the wound in his chest was still bleeding. One evening, I found him sitting on the floor by the fire with empty whiskey bottles scattered around him. It was Michael's birthday. He would have been 30 years old. I sat down beside him without asking permission. Vincent told me everything. How Michael had been different from the rest of the family. Kind. Gentle. How he had wanted to be a doctor instead of a criminal. How Vincent had protected him, fought their father so Michael could go to medical school. How proud he had been. And then how he had failed. How he had chosen the family's reputation over Michael's life. How he had believed he was smart enough to save his brother without appearing weak. How wrong he had been. Vincent's voice broke when he said Michael had probably died thinking his brother had abandoned him. That was the wound that would not heal. Not guilt over a mistake, but the knowledge that the person he loved most had died feeling betrayed. I did not offer empty comfort. Instead, I told him about James. How I had forced my dying husband through 8 months of brutal treatment he did not want. How I had refused to let him go peacefully. How I still did not know if I had acted out of love or selfish fear of being alone. I told Vincent that death was not atonement. Death was escape. If he died, the pain would not disappear. It would just pass to others. Michael had spent his life saving people. He would never want his brother to die as punishment. Vincent looked at me with eyes that had not cried in 3 years. But I saw them shine in the firelight. He reached out and touched my face, wiping away a tear I had not known was there. It was the first gentle thing I had seen him do. We sat together until morning, our hands clasped tight, 2 drowning people sharing one piece of driftwood. After that night, something changed between us. Vincent stopped hiding in the dark. He let me open the curtains. He started eating again. His wound healed completely. And I realized I should leave. My job was done. But when I told him I was looking for a new position, he said no. Not angry, Just quiet. Certain. He said I was not just his nurse. I was the reason he wanted to wake up in the morning. The only person who had looked at the worst parts of him and stayed anyway. He asked me to stay. Not as an employee. As myself. Clara Hayes. The woman he did not deserve but wanted anyway. I said yes. It was the most reckless choice of my life. But my life had been reckless for a long time already. Vincent's father, old and dying in the West Wing, called for me one afternoon. He thanked me for giving his son a reason to live. He said he was dying and the only thing he wanted before closing his eyes was to see Vincent truly alive again. 2 weeks later, everything fell apart. Gunshots exploded through the mansion at midnight. Vincent shoved me into a wardrobe and told me to hide. I heard shots, screams, breaking glass. Then the bedroom door burst open. 3 men with guns. Vincent killed 2 of them. But the third one aimed at me when I ran from my hiding place. Vincent threw himself in front of the bullet. It tore through his stomach, and he collapsed into my arms. His blood spilled hot and red across my hands. I screamed for help while pressing my shirt against the wound. Vincent looked at me with eyes going dim and told me to run. To hide. To live. I told him I was not going anywhere. That I was not afraid of death. Only of losing him. He whispered that he loved me. That he was afraid to die now because he did not want to leave me. I cried and told him I loved him too. That he was not allowed to die. Not now. Not after we had just found each other. Vincent survived. 3 days unconscious. 3 days I sat beside him, holding his hand, refusing to let go. When he woke, the first thing he did was smile at me. The man who never smiled. Who never showed weakness. He smiled. He told me he wanted to change. Not abandon his family, but transform it. Move toward legitimate business. And he wanted to build a free clinic in the poorest part of the city, where Michael had once worked. A place where people without money could still get help. He would name it after his brother. Turn his pain into something that mattered. 6 months later, the clinic opened. Hundreds of people came. Vincent stood on stage with me beside him, our hands locked together. He told the crowd this place existed because of a brother who had dreamed of it. And because of a woman who had taught him that healing was not just about bandaging wounds, but about choosing to live. When I stepped forward to speak, the room spun and went dark. I woke to Vincent's terrified face and a doctor's gentle smile. I was pregnant. Vincent fainted. Right there on stage. In front of 300 people. When he woke, he pulled me into his arms and cried. Not from sadness. But from joy. They say Vincent Moretti was cursed. But I know the truth. He was just waiting for someone stubborn enough to stay.